The main character of our story is Nala, a lioness who grew up in a wildlife sanctuary, where she was cared for and protected by the dedicated staff. Nala was not only a majestic creature but also a loving and devoted mother. With a heart full of tenderness for her cubs. She had 2 adorable lion cubs, one of whom was Simba. Simba, full of life, energy, and curiosity, was Nala's joy, and they shared an unbreakable bond. Nala watched over Simba with an unwavering sense of pride and love, always ensuring he was safe and content. However, the peaceful life in the sanctuary was shattered one fateful day. Nala's world turned upside down when a tragic accident occurred. The sanctuary, though meant to provide a safe haven, had unforeseen dangers lurking within it. Despite all the care the staff took, tragedy struck. It was an afternoon just like any other when Nala heard a frantic cry. A sound she would never forget. Rushing to the source of the noise, she found Simba lying motionless on the ground, his small body still, his once bright eyes now closed. Nala's heart stopped, her breathing became shallow, and for a brief moment, she stood frozen in disbelief. She rushed to her cub, desperately nuzzling him with her head, hoping he would stir, hoping to feel the warmth of life return. "Simba, please," she cried, her voice choked with emotion. She could hear the frantic cries of her heart, but there was no response from her beloved cub. Nala continued to nuzzle him, licking his fur, her paws gently touching him. But no matter what she did, Simba remained still. The other cub, smaller and less aware, began to whimper nearby, but Nala couldn't focus on anything else. She couldn't comprehend what had happened. The sanctuary, her haven, had failed to protect her son. She felt as though the very foundation of her world had collapsed. Nala's mind raced with confusion and despair. How could this be? How could I lose him? She thought over and over, her heart bleeding with the sharp sting of loss. The staff arrived, but Nala barely noticed them. She was consumed by her grief, unable to let go of Simba's lifeless body. The quiet sanctuary that had always been a place of peace now felt like a tomb. Nala could hear the faint murmurs of the staff trying to comfort her, but their words seemed distant, irrelevant. She could not bear to hear them. Her mind was a haze, her emotions a storm. She pressed her face against Simba's fur, desperate for some sign, anything that would tell her this was all a horrible dream. But the truth was undeniable. Simba was gone. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. The world around Nala blurred as her heart shattered into a million pieces. Her protective instincts, which had always kept her vigilant and strong, had failed her in the most devastating way. The thought that she could not save her cub from harm gnawed at her soul. She wanted to scream, to cry out in anger and frustration, but no words came. All she could feel was the overwhelming weight of her grief. The loss of Simba was not just the loss of a cub, it was the loss of a part of herself. A mother's love, boundless and deep, had always been Nala's greatest strength. But now, in this cruel twist of fate, it was her undoing. She felt as though she had been hollowed out, like a piece of her soul had been ripped away. The pain was unbearable, a constant ache that pulsed through her every breath. It was as if the very fabric of her being had been torn apart, leaving her lost in a sea of sorrow. Nothing could fill the void left by Simba's death. The sanctuary, once a place of comfort, now felt empty and cold. Nala could not fathom a life without Simba. She had watched him grow, had cared for him, and had protected him with all her might. To lose him now, so suddenly, left her feeling utterly powerless. The grief weighed heavily on her chest, each heartbeat a reminder of the unbearable pain she was enduring. She didn't know how to go on. She didn't know how to face the world without her son. The days seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of her, each one a painful reminder of what she had lost. Every corner of the sanctuary, every sight and sound, reminded her of Simba. His absence echoed through the very air she breathed, a constant reminder of the precious life that was taken too soon. Nala's love for Simba had been unconditional, pure, and deep, and now, that love had been overshadowed by a sorrow that would never fully heal. As much as she wanted to move past the pain, to find a way to live without Simba. She knew that the loss would be with her forever. The weight of her grief would never truly lift. And so, Nala stood there, her body trembling with the intensity of her emotions, her heart breaking over and over again. She had lost her cub, and nothing could ever bring him back. The sanctuary, once a place of safety and joy, now felt like a prison of heartache. Nala's world had been shattered, and she didn't know how to pick up the pieces. The days after Simba's death seemed to blur together for Nala, each one darker and heavier than the last. The sanctuary, which had once been a place of solace and safety, now felt like a vast, hollow space. Every corner, every whisper of the wind, reminded her of the son she had lost. No matter how hard she tried to focus on anything else, her grief consumed her, filling her mind and heart with an unbearable ache. Nala couldn't accept Simba's death. She couldn't fathom a world without him. The life they had shared, so full of joy and hope, had been ripped away in an instant, leaving nothing but emptiness. Nala had always prided herself on being strong and protective, a fierce mother who would never let anything harm her cubs. But now, she felt powerless, as though the world had turned against her in the cruelest way possible. She no longer had the energy to care for anything. She wandered aimlessly through the sanctuary, her once proud and regal demeanor replaced with an air of deep sorrow. The other animals in the sanctuary, who had always been so vibrant and full of life, now seemed to shrink away in her presence, as if they could feel the weight of her grief. Nala moved slowly, her head hanging low, her body sluggish as though burdened by the weight of the world. The staff, who had grown fond of Nala over the years, tried to comfort her. They would approach her gently, offering food and affection, but she would barely acknowledge them. When they spoke to her, she would simply growl softly, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to carry the weight of her sorrow. It was as though she couldn't bear to hear any words of comfort. As if no amount of kindness could undo the pain she felt inside. The staff didn't know how to help her. They had seen animals grieve before, but never like this. Nala had always been a proud, independent lioness, and to see her so broken, so defeated, was heartbreaking. They tried everything they could think of, offering food, giving her space, and even attempting to coax her into socializing with the other animals. But nothing worked. Nala remained withdrawn, her spirit crushed under the weight of her loss. As the days turned into weeks, Nala's behavior grew more erratic. She refused to eat or drink, her body growing weaker with each passing day. She spent hours staring out into the distance, her eyes glazed over with a deep, haunting sadness. The once beautiful lioness, whose graceful movements had once been a symbol of strength, now moved like a ghost, her movements slow and labored. She was no longer the protector she had once been. Now she was the one in need of protection, lost in a sea of grief she couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Leo, Nala's remaining cub, was struggling with his own pain. He had lost his brother, and now, it seemed, he was losing his mother as well. The bond between Nala and Leo had always been strong, but since Simba's death, Nala had become a shell of the mother she had once been. Leo could see the change in her, could feel the emptiness that had overtaken her, and it terrified him. Every day, Leo would try to get close to his mother, hoping for a sign of affection, a touch, a comforting nuzzle, but Nala would pull away, her gaze distant and unseeing. Leo's small heart ached as he watched his mother, once so loving and attentive, retreat further and further into herself. He didn't understand why she wasn't responding, why she wasn't there for him the way she had always been. Leo, desperate for attention, would nudge Nala's side with his nose, trying to coax her into noticing him, but Nala would barely react, her eyes dull and lifeless. It was as if she couldn't even recognize him anymore. Every time Leo tried to get close, Nala would either growl softly or move away, as though her grief was too heavy to allow room for anything else. Leo felt the sting of rejection deeply, but it was nothing compared to the loneliness that gnawed at him. He had lost Simba, and now, it seemed, he was losing his mother as well. The sanctuary, once filled with the joyful sounds of play and laughter, had fallen silent. Nala's grief was so palpable that even the other animals in the sanctuary seemed to sense it. The air was thick with sorrow, and every creature, from the smallest rabbit to the largest elephant, seemed to walk with a heavier step. Even the birds no longer sang in the mornings, and the once vibrant trees seemed to sag under the weight of the loss. It was as if the entire sanctuary had become a place of mourning, a place where even nature itself was grieving. Leo, still a young cub, didn't know how to cope with the loss of his brother and the sudden emotional distance from his mother. He had always looked up to Nala, admired her strength and beauty, but now, he couldn't understand why she wasn't there for him. He didn't know how to fill the emptiness inside him, and as much as he wanted to comfort her, he was too small, too powerless to reach the depths of her sorrow. The sounds of Nala's mournful growls filled the sanctuary, a low, sorrowful rumble that echoed through the stillness. It was a sound that no creature could ignore, a sound that spoke of a grief so profound, so all-encompassing, that it could silence the world around it. The other animals, too, seemed to feel the weight of her pain, and they would watch her from a distance, their own eyes heavy with sympathy and sorrow. But nothing could ease Nala's pain. No amount of comfort, no amount of attention, could bring Simba back. Nala's heart was shattered beyond repair, and she couldn't see beyond the fog of her grief. Every corner of the sanctuary reminded her of what she had lost, and the weight of that loss was too much to bear. And so, Nala wandered, lost in her sorrow, while Leo watched helplessly, unable to reach the mother who had once been his whole world. He didn't know how to make it stop, how to bring his mother back. All he could do was wait, in the hope that someday, somehow, she might find her way back to him. Emily had been working at the wildlife sanctuary for several years, caring for all kinds of animals, from the largest elephants to the smallest birds. She was well versed in the complexities of animal behavior and knew that grief, while a natural response to loss, could deeply affect an animal's ability to function. And she had never seen anything quite like Nala's grief. The lioness, once vibrant and full of life, had become a shadow of her former self. Emily had spent hours observing Nala, trying to figure out how she could help her, how she could bring back the mother lioness that she had once been. Emily knew that animals, like humans, often needed new connections to heal after loss. Sometimes, the bond with another creature could help them overcome their grief, providing them with a sense of purpose, something to focus on other than the sorrow that threatened to drown them. After a long period of careful consideration, Emily decided to try something different. She didn't know if it would work, but it was worth a shot. Emily had recently come across a kitten named Whiskers, a tiny, scruffy little cat who had been found abandoned in the woods near the sanctuary. Whiskers was a stray, only a few weeks old, and had lost her mother. She was too young to fend for herself, too small and fragile to survive without help. Emily had taken her in and cared for her, and the kitten was beginning to grow stronger, but she still needed constant attention and affection. Emily saw something in Whiskers, something that could possibly be the key to Nala's healing. On one quiet morning, Emily carefully brought Whiskers to Nala's enclosure. She had no idea what to expect. Would Nala even care about a tiny, helpless kitten? Would she reject the newcomer as she had rejected everything else? It was a gamble, but Emily hoped it would spark something in Nala, a glimpse of the maternal instincts that had once guided her every action. At first, Nala showed no interest in Whiskers. She lay on the ground, her eyes distant, staring off into the emptiness. She had little energy left to even acknowledge the tiny creature that was now so close. Whiskers, however, wasn't frightened. Despite her small size and vulnerability, she didn't hesitate. She padded over to Nala's side, her wide, innocent eyes gazing up at the lioness. The kitten's persistence was surprising. She didn't shy away or cower, despite the intimidating size of Nala. Whiskers, with her soft fur and wide, hopeful eyes, nudged Nala gently with her nose, as if to say, "I need you." Her tiny meows filled the silence, breaking through the heavy air that had settled around Nala like a cloud. For a moment, Nala shifted slightly, her head raising ever so slightly as she looked at the kitten. But the response was fleeting. Nala's gaze returned to the distance, and she let out a low sigh. It was as if she couldn't muster the strength to care for anything, let alone this tiny creature who was so desperately seeking her attention. Emily, who had been watching from a distance, was about to call it quits when she noticed something in Nala's eyes, a flicker. A brief moment of recognition. Whiskers, undeterred, continued her approach. She nuzzled closer to Nala, brushing against her massive side. Her small, trembling body sought warmth, comfort, and safety. In that moment, she did something that made Nala's body stiffen slightly. She began to nuzzle against Nala's neck. It wasn't an aggressive move, but rather one of tenderness and trust, as though Whiskers instinctively knew that Nala had once been a mother, that she had the capacity to offer care and love. The lioness remained still, but Emily could see a subtle shift in her. Nala's large, golden eyes slowly focused on the kitten again. There was a softness in her gaze now, a faint flicker of curiosity. Whiskers, sensing this shift, pushed her luck and boldly curled up beside Nala, snuggling close to her. The kitten's purring, soft and steady, filled the air. The sound seemed to break something within Nala. She let out a long, deep breath and shifted her body slightly, allowing Whiskers to nestle against her. Nala's movements were slow and deliberate, but for the first time since Simba's death, there was a tenderness in her touch. She lifted her massive paw and gently brushed it over the kitten's back, her claws retracting, as if offering the tiniest bit of protection. The connection was fragile, but it was real. Whiskers, oblivious to the lioness's emotional turmoil, continued to snuggle, trusting that Nala would offer the warmth she so desperately needed. For Nala, the feeling was different. Something about the kitten's trust, her vulnerability, touched a part of her that had been buried beneath layers of grief. In some small way, Nala recognized the need to protect, to nurture, to care once again. Days passed, and the bond between Nala and Whiskers began to grow. At first, it was a slow process. Nala would occasionally brush her paw against the kitten's body or let Whiskers curl up beside her. She wasn't fully ready to embrace the role of a mother again, but she seemed to soften bit by bit. Whiskers, who had once been so fragile, now exuded a new sense of security whenever she was close to Nala. The staff began to notice the subtle changes in Nala's behavior. She was still distant, still deeply mourning Simba, but there were moments when she would nudge Whiskers gently or allow the kitten to climb up onto her back. It was a small shift, but to Emily, it was a glimmer of hope. The bond between them was far from perfect, but it was the beginning of something new, something that could help Nala begin to heal. Whiskers, in her own way, was starting to fill a small void in Nala's heart. And for Nala, who had lost so much, this tiny kitten represented the possibility of love again, of connection, and of healing. It wasn't the same as the bond she had shared with Simba, but it was a step forward. She wasn't ready to move on completely, but maybe, just maybe, Whiskers would help her find her way back to the love she once knew. And so, the journey of healing began. Slowly, tenderly, with a tiny kitten and a grieving lioness learning how to find comfort in each other. Each day, Whiskers grew bolder in her approach, drawn to Nala with an innate sense of trust that defied the lioness's initial resistance. The tiny kitten would cautiously nudge Nala with her head, her small, fragile body curling up beside the lioness. She wasn't afraid of the towering creature next to her, despite the stark difference in size. Whiskers seemed to understand that Nala had the capacity for love and care. And day by day, the kitten's presence seemed to chip away at the walls Nala had built around her heart. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but Whiskers' persistence brought a subtle shift in Nala. She began to respond to the kitten's playful nudges, her body stiffening less and less with each gentle touch. The lioness would allow Whiskers to climb up beside her, nudging her nose against the kitten's fur. The connection was still tentative, but it was real. One fateful morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, Whiskers did something unexpected. She scrambled up onto Nala's back, her tiny paws scrambling for purchase. At first, Nala barely noticed. She was lost in her own thoughts, gazing into the distance, still mired in the depth of her grief. But when the kitten made her way up to Nala's shoulders and nestled between the lioness's powerful shoulders, something profound happened. For a brief moment, Nala stiffened. Her large muscles tensed as she felt the light weight of Whiskers resting on her back. The feeling was foreign, yet strangely comforting. The sensation of a small, innocent creature clinging to her brought a sudden rush of warmth to Nala's heart. It was as if the kitten, in her own quiet, simple way, had reignited a flame inside Nala, a spark of tenderness that had been buried under layers of grief for so long. Nala slowly, almost cautiously, turned her head to look at Whiskers. The kitten's wide eyes gazed back at her, filled with innocence and trust. Whiskers' tiny purrs vibrated softly against Nala's back, a sound so full of life and hope that it almost felt like a lullaby to the grieving lioness. In that moment, something inside Nala shifted. The weight of her sorrow seemed to ease, even if only for a fleeting instant. She found herself leaning into the sensation of Whiskers' warmth. The small creature had unknowingly reminded Nala of the tenderness she had once felt as a mother, of the bond she had shared with Simba. For a moment, Nala wasn't the broken, grieving lioness she had been. She was simply a mother again. Whiskers, unaware of the profound effect she had on Nala, continued to purr and snuggle closer, wrapping her tiny paws around the lioness's fur as though it were the most natural thing in the world. And for Nala, it was. It felt right. It felt like home. It felt like something she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever, the pure, unconditional love of a mother for her child. The days that followed were filled with gradual but undeniable changes. Nala began to seek out Whiskers more often, rubbing her head gently against the kitten's small body, nudging her with her nose in a gesture that spoke of care and affection. Where Nala had once recoiled from any form of closeness, now she sought it. It wasn't just the kitten's presence that was healing Nala, it was the reawakening of her maternal instincts. The restoration of a love she had nearly forgotten in the wake of her pain. Nala began to lick Whiskers' fur, gently cleaning the kitten with the same careful, loving attention she had once given Simba. Her large, rough tongue stroked over the tiny kitten's soft coat, the movements slow and deliberate. Whiskers, feeling the care in Nala's touch, purred louder, curling up even closer. The trust between them grew stronger with each passing day. As Nala embraced her role as a mother once again, this time to a creature much smaller and more fragile than what she had been accustomed to. The other animals at the sanctuary began to notice the changes as well. Nala, who had once been a shell of her former self, was slowly regaining her strength. Her movements were still slower than before, but there was a subtle confidence returning to her. When the staff approached her now, Nala no longer growled in response. Instead, she would allow him to come closer, no longer pulling away in fear or sorrow. And though her grief for Simba never fully disappeared, she now had something else to focus on, a new life. One that needed her. In the presence of Whiskers, Nala found a new purpose. The grief of losing Simba still lingered, but it no longer consumed her entirely. She had learned that while the past would always be a part of her, she didn't have to live in it forever. She could take the lessons of love and care that Simba had given her and apply them to this new relationship with Whiskers. There was still so much love within her to give, love that had never truly disappeared, just hidden beneath the weight of sorrow. Whiskers, for her part, flourished under Nala's care. She had once been an orphan, lost and alone, but now she had found a protector, a surrogate mother who would guide her through life. Nala's gentle touch, her protective instincts, made Whiskers feel safe and loved in a way she had never known. Together, they formed a bond that transcended their differences, one that was rooted in mutual trust and affection. The transformation that had begun with tentative steps continued to unfold. As Nala watched over Whiskers, her heart gradually healed. Each act of care, each moment of tenderness, helped to stitch the broken pieces of her heart back together. It was a long and difficult journey, but it was a journey of healing, of rediscovering the joy of loving and nurturing again. Nala was not the same lioness she had been before Simba's death. She had changed, had been shaped by her loss. But now, she was learning that there was room in her heart for new beginnings, for new forms of love. And as Whiskers grew stronger and more independent, Nala would always be there, watching over her, just as she had once watched over Simba. Through the connection with this small, determined kitten, Nala had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, though it may be temporarily lost, can always find its way back when we open ourselves to it again. And with that love came healing, slow, steady, but sure. As the days passed, Whiskers became an inseparable part of Nala's life. The once desolate lioness had gradually begun to embrace her role as a mother once more. This time to a tiny, scrappy kitten. Whiskers, with her playful nature and gentle purrs, brought a sense of joy to Nala's life that she hadn't felt since Simba's death. The kitten's presence filled the void left in Nala's heart, and her grief, though never fully gone, began to soften, slowly being replaced by the warmth of love and the comfort of companionship. Nala no longer wandered aimlessly through the sanctuary, lost in her sorrow. Instead, she now walked with a sense of purpose, her head held high as she followed Whiskers around. The kitten would scurry ahead, bounding energetically across the ground, while Nala followed slowly behind, keeping a watchful eye over her. In a way, Nala had rediscovered a part of herself that had been buried under the weight of her loss. She was a mother again, not in the traditional sense of raising her biological cub, but in a way that transcended species, transcended the pain of her past. What Nala had learned through her bond with Whiskers was that motherhood and love were not confined by biology or boundaries. Whiskers may not have been her biological daughter, but the bond they shared was no less powerful. The love Nala felt for the kitten was just as deep, just as fierce as the love she had once felt for Simba. In fact, in many ways, it was a love that allowed Nala to heal, to open herself up to new possibilities. Whiskers, with her tiny body and unrelenting hope, had helped Nala rediscover a tenderness that had been dormant for too long. Nala would groom Whiskers with the same care she once had for Simba, her rough tongue gently stroking the kitten's fur. She would watch over her, ensuring that the little one was safe and sound. And in return, Whiskers would snuggle up against Nala, purring contentedly, her small body warm against the lioness's side. Nala could feel the healing power of this new connection, the way it soothed her broken heart and reminded her that love was still alive within her. The bond between Nala and Whiskers was not just one of mother and child, but of mutual healing. Whiskers had brought something new into Nala's life, something that had allowed her to open her heart again. And through this love, Nala found that even the deepest of wounds could begin to heal. But Nala was not the only one who was learning to accept this new family dynamic. Leo, her other cub, had also started to adjust to the presence of Whiskers in their lives. At first, Leo had been hesitant. He didn't quite understand why his mother had so readily accepted the small kitten. But over time, he began to see the bond that was forming between them. He had lost Simba too, and in some ways, he had felt a bit abandoned by his mother's grief. But now, as Nala's focus shifted toward Whiskers, Leo began to realize that there was room in Nala's heart for more love, for more connections. Slowly but surely, Leo began to warm to Whiskers. At first, it was small gestures, allowing the kitten to play near him without chasing her away, watching her as she tumbled and frolicked around the sanctuary. But soon, Leo began to interact with Whiskers more directly. He would nudge her with his nose, gently batting at her with his large paw in a playful manner. Whiskers, ever curious, would respond with the same boundless energy, darting around Leo, teasing him with her small, quick movements. One day, Leo and Whiskers were chasing each other around the enclosure, both of them completely caught up in the joy of the game. Nala watched from a distance, a soft purr vibrating in her chest as she observed the two of them. Leo, once solitary and unsure of his place in the world, had found a new companion in Whiskers. And Whiskers, though she had been alone and vulnerable when she first arrived, now had a big brother to watch over her. The bond between the two of them was growing stronger with each passing day. And Nala knew that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. For Nala, watching the two of them together was a moment of realization. She had once thought that her heart could never heal, that the pain of losing Simba would forever cast a shadow over her life. But here, in front of her, was proof that love could be reborn. She had found a new family, a new source of joy and connection. And through her relationship with Whiskers and Leo, Nala had learned that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there were still opportunities for growth, for love, and for healing. As the weeks passed, the relationship between Nala, Leo, and Whiskers grew deeper. Nala had once been a mother who cared only for her biological cubs. But now she had become a mother to both Leo and Whiskers. Each in their own unique way. She had learned that love did not need to follow a set path. It wasn't about bloodlines or expectations, it was about the connections that were formed. The bonds that were built on trust, affection, and mutual care. In the quiet moments of the day, when the three of them would rest together in the sun, Nala would feel a deep sense of contentment. She wasn't the same lioness she had been before Simba's death, but she had found something even more meaningful. A second chance at motherhood. A chance to create a new family and a new life. And with Leo and Whiskers by her side, she no longer felt alone. She had rediscovered the love that she thought was lost forever. And in doing so, she had found a new sense of purpose and joy. The bond that had formed between Nala, Leo, and Whiskers was unbreakable. Together, they had weathered the storm of loss and emerged stronger, united by a love that transcended pain. Nala knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them. She had love in her heart again, and that love would guide her, always. And so, with her two cubs, one by birth, the other by fate, Nala's journey of healing continued. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Nala no longer feared it. She had learned that no matter how much pain one endures, there is always room for love. And always a chance to start anew.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.